All right, we're live.
Button up, buddy.
We're live, guys.
About that, I was.
Hi, you guys.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Let's give everyone a little bit to jump in.
Yes.
For everyone joining, this is our first book club. We're going to have a short little discussion on the first 3 chapters of The Watsons Go to Birmingham. We're just giving everybody a little bit of time to jump in.
5 people.
Cool. And if anyone has, as we're discussing this, any thoughts, any insights, any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. We can bring it up. We are live right now.
All right, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. Talk about chapter 1. I guess we should do an intro to the whole book, since this is week 1 of The Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis. It won the Newbery Medal and the Coretta Scott King Award. I am really enjoying this book so far.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't really gotten into the meat of it. I mean, they haven't really even talked about going to Birmingham at this point. But the setup for the character is very well written. It's you really understand who the narrator is.
I don't know about anybody else, but when Quiz recommended this book to us, I don't want to say I was worried, but I was just aware of the fact that he said he read this when he was, in elementary school. And I think that he does a really good job of writing it that kids are able to read it, but it's not dull for adults to read. It's really good. It flows. It's really funny. I don't know if you guys got that too, but I thought a couple of these really good. Did you guys read like the forewords and the intro like that?
I have not had a chance to at this point.
Right. One of the forewords is about how he's really good. Like that's one of his best things, how he just weaves like comedy into stuff. So that is really cool to see jumping out the gate.
Hi, John Coleman. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, hi, John Coleman.
Yeah.
John.
Thanks, John, for joining.
There's some like really interesting parts that come up. You kind of have this foreshadowing of we are going somewhere because it's super cold in Flint, Michigan, which is where this is initially set. I remember, I think I watched a movie on this, but I never knew it was initially the exposition is set in Flint, Michigan, which I think is really a great juxtaposition against Birmingham. Is like you have this like city mecca place where, as a result of the Great Migration, you have this African American flight out of the southern states to kind of go into a booming city where equality is more opportune, and so you have that put up against Birmingham, which is a place where we know is the Deep South. Jim Crow at this time is very alive and well. We know what the scene is like down there. We know what the potentiality of them to run into down there. But seeing them in Flint, Michigan, after all of the recent news that we've known about Flint, Michigan, and the water crisis there, that at one point in time, this was a place where you could go as a Black person and see some economic success, some social success, and really thrive as a family in a place that had, opportunity versus where we know the South becomes limited on that opportunity during the era of Jim Crow and, segregation. So I thought that was a cool. And I don't know if he intentionally, this is written a long time ago, but kind of comes full circle to what we're talking about now when we see a place that was once thriving not be doing so well. And what that really speaks to the Black experience of what you thought was opportunity over the years for your generations of children, that come after you, of your family, that opportunity is completely gone. So
I think it's really interesting to bring up economic success. First off, the book opens up and they're all huddled up on the couch, blanket, their heater is out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of paints the picture that they're not well off. And this is a little bit out of order, but in the third chapter, Kenny makes Rufus. He makes friends with Rufus, and he starts eating lunch with Rufus. And when Kenny's mom finds out that Cody, the little brother, and Rufus are eating lunch with Kenny, she starts packing,
more lunch.
So it's like they must not be that bad off if they can afford to, feed other kids too. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I don't want to dig too deep in the third chapter right off the bat. We'll get there, but it is cool. Like Shamika was saying, that Flint, Michigan used to be this like place of opportunity, and you don't just see that through the Watsons. You see that with new families coming in the first 3 chapters of the book with Rufus and his little brother. I think that's kind of cool that that theme doesn't just like stop with the Watsons. They explore it just a little bit further by introducing this new family from the South, who is less well off.
We would not, we wouldn't think of Flint, Michigan as being that as of what it is, recently.
Yeah. I appreciate how in the first 3 chapters, it really doesn't get into the meat of them going and being, or meeting this prejudice in the South, but they themselves have this kind of prejudice over Southerners throughout the first 3. Like the dad himself talks about the guy that was almost their father.
Old Hambone Hendrick.
You can see him doing his Southern draw to make fun of this guy, as do kids when they meet the other guys from Arkansas.
Yeah. We have some new people coming in. I want to thank Tanya Eubanks and Keita Bonwell. Thank you, Kiana, for coming. And Reagan, this is my cousin. Thank you guys for showing up and watching. She got a different name on Facebook, but that's Reagan. That's baby Reagan. Thank you for coming in. So we're talking about the Watsons going to Birmingham. It's a lot of good meat coming in early in this storyline, which I'm really glad that they're kind of talking about the cultural issues without talking about the cultural issues and saying this is about poverty. But there are parts in it where we talk about intersectionality the last time we were here with the online discussion, and how there could be individual privileges within intra-community. So even in the Black community, there's individual privileges. Like I come from a 2-parent home, raised by both my mom and my father. That income definitely changed my circumstances for the better. And no, we weren't well off and we're not rich, but we definitely weren't what we consider to be severely low below the poverty line, and there are people in our community that are. So we have to talk about intersectionality, and this is pretty much what it's like. You could be struggling, but there's always someone who has it worse than you. And talking about privilege and what it means and what it looks like is very important. And when we put it up against a community, or we put it against cross communities, so it's like this. They're touching on that so early on in these things, and it makes me think about what happens when they go to Birmingham, because being from a city as a person of color, you get more opportunity than someone living in the South with more deprivation, more social, where the social norms are not really in your favor. So my dad is from Arkansas, which is so funny. They bring up, how the kid, Rufus, is from Arkansas. And immediately when I heard, in my head, when I'm picturing Rufus speak for the first time, and he's like, "Hi, y'all." I was like, oh my God, that's my daddy. My daddy is a 76-year-old man from Ashdown, Arkansas. So that comes into play. I definitely had a different experience growing up in the city than my dad did growing up in southern Arkansas and small town country. So you kind of have those two worlds playing. This is a Flint, Michigan kid, and this kid from the South comes, and two different worlds apart, but similar experiences, as they're both considered to be the downtrodden characters of their own stories, where they don't have the success socially with peers. Poverty has stricken them very similarly, yet very diverse worlds apart.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned like being able to relate because your dad's from Arkansas, because I find the entire family to be very relatable. You have Byron, who's a teenager, and he's becoming a teenager, and he doesn't want, he wants to play stuff off. He doesn't want to, do the stuff. Byron's Kenny's kind of caught in the middle. And then you have the dad and the mom, they kind of go back and forth joking about, Hamill Henderson and this other stuff. And then you got the little girl, Joetta. And I think it's super relatable. I think that's one of the things that he did really well in this book. And I think, like I said earlier, it's going to shape how I go through and read this book. I'm going to be looking at it from my perspective as somebody who has learned how to break down literature like this. But I'm also going to be thinking about how somebody who would be reading this in school, like as a young kid, would look at it. And I think it's really interesting, as we kind of talked about in the beginning of it, in these first couple of chapters, there's, obviously they're in Michigan, so things are different there than they are in Alabama in the 60s.
Yeah.
But we have this conversation early between mom and dad about Hamilton Henderson and when the mom was growing up in Alabama. And the dad says something like, oh, yeah, we'd be much better off down there. Where's the coloreds only bathroom downtown that I
Yeah.
quick little line that I don't think if you were a kid reading this, I don't think you would really pick up on that. But it's something like that I thought was really interesting, that it's almost this throwaway line that segregation and racism is just so expected to be a part of these people's lives that it was really sad to me. Like Shamika was saying earlier that she found a couple of these parts sad. That was really sad to me, that it was just so accepted to be part of their lives. Like, oh, we can't go down there. Like we can't use the same bathrooms and have the same amenities as the white people. And not something that, we are, young people. It's not something that we had to grow up with.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. I don't know. I think in the African American community, because this is like, we're talking about a black family here, right? Is in the, traditional black family, because we see mom, we see dad, and there's kids. And so we talk about a nuclear unit, and that's kind of what it would look like in America to have, mom and dad and brothers and sisters. In this family, we are talking about this situation of what it means to be black and how we get our identity from our blackness. I don't know, it's just something about being African American. There's our experiences that are so normalized that we can joke about them. In this case, like, oh yeah, color bathrooms, so great down in the South. And it would be like, it's funny, it's, because it's a part of your experience, primarily because it's painful. And we know we get a lot of our comedy from pain. When something hurts, it's like, that's the most funniest thing ever, watching somebody else's pain, watching them fall. And so we can even derive a sense of comedy from our own, pain. A lot of, black, comedians talk about these experiences in the black community that to outside people, you go, oh God, that's like horrible. And then we're just cracking up because it's funny, because it's lived experience that we know to navigate. And yes, painful, but this is real life and it's comedic.
Still in chapter 1, there's actually a great example of finding, humor in pain when Byron gets his lips stuck to the side.
Yes.
And, obviously, he thinks that he's pulling a trick on him. He's gonna throw a snowball at him or something, and he side and gets the parents. And the mom is just beside herself. She does not know what to do, and the dad cannot help himself from cracking up laughing. Right. If my brother or in the future my son had had that happen to him,
especially the circumstances of like trying to kiss
the mirror,
tongue stuck to a pool, but like literally trying to kiss yourself in the mirror. That is a really comical setup.
And I was really grateful that I got to have that moment with the dad at the same time, because I was assuming that his tongue got stuck. And then,
me too.
So I wasn't, because some of the things that he was saying, I was like, how do you say help with or whatever it was with a And then the dad goes, oh, is your tongue stuck too? And I was like, oh my God, it's his lips. He must have been so funny.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And then the mom ends up just kind of bopping his head and getting him free.
And like she pulls him like full frontal pull from the mirror, and I was like, "Oh, that got to hurt." I don't know. It's something about that.
Or just saying like, I would never intentionally hurt you.
But this is gonna hurt. I don't know. I feel like I heard that at the beginning of every whooping I've ever had from my parents. I love you, but this is time.
had for chapter 1, I actually want to go back a second. It was when obviously they're huddled up on the couch under a blanket. The news is on, and the weatherman says, hey, it's going to be negative 25 for the next week. Which if we're all living in Missouri, we can
relate.
Poor Sam's up in Chicago, but he goes, the temperature's gonna be negative 25. But here's some good news: down in Alabama, it's gonna be. And then Dad starts coughing, and but they all hear the weatherman say in the 70s, and then he off. And the dad said, or it's Kenny. It's in the narration says they might as well have tied him up and said ready, aim, fire.
Right.
That was on page 6. No, page 3. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the things that I noted for chapter 2, because obviously it's just kind of there, but once it happens again in chapter 2, I'm like, oh, this is something that's going to be throughout, and then again in chapter 3, he mentions it again. So the chapter 2, we see the kids go to school. Byron and Kenny are in close grades because Byron has been held back. Kenny, we learn that he loves to read. And he's super smart. He's actually paraded from class to class.
There's something about that didn't sit well with me.
No.
It didn't sit well.
I think like their heart was in the right place. Like if you guys apply yourselves and really work on your studies, like you can read well like this too. But like it's not a good look.
No.
It's not a good look. And I wonder, because I'm trying to get the picture of what the school is like. I mean, I went to predominantly Black schools my whole life where even the teachers were Black. So I'm trying to get this perception that are these Black teachers doing this? Like they're going from, because we don't know we know the gender of these teachers. We don't, we know their sex, but we don't know their race, because nothing is said like, oh, he's a Black man been teaching physics, whatever. We don't know anything about these teachers. So if you are the reader, you're allowed to kind of surmise, like, is this a white teacher or a Black teacher? And based on your experiences, you may color it different. No pun intended. But you may, in my head, I colored them as Black because, I went to elementary school and a lot of my teachers were Black and like Latino. And so I was like, okay, I could, and this did happen. And I think I was the kid that got paraded around and go, oh, read this chapter on, but if you change the color of the teachers and you make them white, it changes the perception and the connotation of what's happening. It gives almost this archaic, ancient view on what it must have been like to be like a good slave. When you think about these are, teach all these bad slaves how to be a good obeying slave, and he goes in and he gives this performance, and you see all these other kids in the classroom looking at him like, dude, what is the problem? Why are you doing this? And so something that he goes and he's probably very prideful of becomes something like a source of shame and guilt.
It's almost like an Uncle Tom situation.
Yeah,
it is. It's an Uncle Tom situation.
It was interesting for me in the second chapter because I had this like change in my view of Kenny throughout the chapter. Because in the first bit, you hear about him being paraded around and how he's kind of always being referenced as Poindexter and always. Mm-hmm. And so you automatically get this, of sadness for him and, empathy for him. But then later on in the chapter, when they introduce the kids from Arkansas, the only thing he's worried about with them is that hopefully they take the brunt of the abuse that they'll be the ones to get picked on. There's not like maybe I can help these kids out because I know where it is. He's like, I hope that they get it. So I don't.
At first, you think that that's what's going to happen. Like, oh, I hope. Because he kept saying this, my savior's here, my savior. And
yeah.
But then you forget, like, when we talk about the savior in the Christian context, it's a sacrifice that is made on your behalf. And so you're like, and he's like, I hope he takes all of it. And I was like, oh, yes, he's just Jesus. It's like, he's going to take the brunt of he's going to be the sacrificial lamb for my sins. And yeah, so it's like, very funny how that the connotation is played. It's very weird, but it's very kind of it's written in a way that makes you don't know which way that was gonna go. I was just thinking he was excited to have somebody like him walk
Right.
on that bus, and he was like, "No, there's somebody worse than me that just came in."
Yeah.
Thank God for that sacrifice.
Yeah. Kind of like, damn, this kid's an ass. Like, no,
That's not cool, man.
he's really kind of an ass.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
he's in. Was it second grade?
No, that confused me too. That I think he started being paraded around when he was in second grade, but I think now
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay.
I had
Okay.
no,
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I had kind of read this like he was in second grade, which gave a confusing perspective to it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it just goes to show like what he's been through already in his life, and being bullied, and having a lazy eye, and being smart. He talks a lot about how his brother kind of saves him from,
Mm.
because his brother's like the king of the school and saves him from a lot of.
Right.
What
He
was
said,
that?
"Yeah, my brother's a god of the school,
God of the
and
school.
Larry Dunn is just the king."
Yeah. But like also, even though his brother's his god, like what he's gone through as far as bullying, to see these people who are less fortunate than him and immediately think, oh good, I'm not going to get bullied anymore because they will.
Hmm.
Well, it was a really cool transition to go from the end of chapter 2. They had Rufus and Cody get on the bus and a little interaction there, and then chapter 3 opens up with Rufus coming and joining Kenny's class, and the teacher pairs them up. They're sitting together, and they're doing multiplication tables. And I thought it was really funny where Rufus goes, "Oh, I know that. Do you want some help?" Because he doesn't know. Like, smart kid in class, and he's like, "No, shut up. I don't need help."
Right, just sitting here.
Um, and then it was like Rufus naturally then, because they were on the same bus, and I don't know, me and Sam went to a small school, but we still had 12, 15 buses. So I'm sure that there's a little bit of camaraderie just by being on the same bus, and then they're in the same class, and then the teacher puts them together, and so Rufus is like, oh, friend, I can just easy friend to make. And Kenny is like, I don't want nothing to do with this guy. Keep us apart. I want it over there, away from me. But like I said, touched on that he almost begrudgingly becomes friends with Rufus because
Right.
he knows that Rufus didn't have lunch that day, and actually I believe the first time when they're out on the playground eating lunch, it's framed in that he forgot to pack a lunch,
Yeah.
and
But
then
immediately, as soon as I read it, I was like, he didn't forget the lunch.
Yeah.
I knew as soon as he read it, as soon as he saw, I was like, this wasn't forgetful. This is life.
Yeah.
and it goes on, and as it continues, like I said, Mama makes 4 peanut butter sandwiches now, 2 for Kenny, and then 1 each for Rufus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
which
mean,
kind of
I
goes to the comment that John Coleman had made at the beginning, saying it kind of talks about the sense of like care and community that a family has to give what they have to
Yeah.
someone who has more needs. And I wonder, I think this is something that I'm interested in seeing develop, is if Kenny's mom cares more about Rufus and Cody, because they're also from the South like she was, and they're also like less off, and they moved here to get a better life, and
Mhm.
kind of sees her own family struggle in them. And I hope that the book goes in more into that kind of relationship that she has.
Just
Yeah.
that real quick, I think it's in chapter 1 they talk about how the dad has been in Flint for 35 years, and the mom obviously is from the South. I want to know how they met, and I don't
Yeah.
I haven't read it at all, so I don't know if they touch on that, but I'm interested to see if they delve into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I was wondering how the timetables kind of matched up,
Right.
because I was like, how long? Because she's still not used to being here. Like, how long have they been here? Like, at least old enough to have this teenager, right? Like,
I enjoyed the way that the narrator, the writer of the book, is very good about putting the story from the narrator's perspective, and
mm,
the narrator has those moments that you can tell that he's a child, and just the ignorance of like him going to his mom and saying, "Yeah, these kids forgot their lunch. And she is like, no, they didn't. But
Mhm.
she's not even gonna be like, nope, it's a thing. She's just gonna be like, oh, okay, whatever, and give them the sandwiches. Or like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when he was talking about Rufus specifically, and he said he's like me. He has two things wrong with him, and I remember having that kind of mentality as a child. Like when you could pick out like the thing that kids normally would get picked on for, and be like, he's got glasses. He's white. You know, there's that kids would get picked on, and it was interesting to see like that, and because it is very much a child's perspective of just like that is how children think. There is like, these are the things that are wrong with us because they get us picked on, and I appreciated that
That's a
from
really good point.
from the writer.
I didn't really
I kind
connect.
of wanted to go back to talking about their similarities because we see this kid come on this bus and he has what we consider to be like a lack of resources, and we see that already coming in. But the fact that they keep getting paired together, they sit, like you said, sit on the bus together. He gets introduced to him in school, and then they sit in class together, and then after that, they're at lunch together. And it's like, what is the author trying to say here? Like he puts them two together all the time. It kind of just goes back to reflectiveness in this community of where there's so much similarity that you almost get associated with one another regardless of whether or not your similarities are that broad, because like we see some economic disparities between the two, but yet here we are continuing to pair them even though we know there's dissimilarities. So I think it kind of just goes back to like looking at the community and looking at a sense of what it means to always be brought back to your community even when you think you're so far out or you think you've been so removed. And it just kind of connects back to that broader theme of just looking at what it means to be black, and even though you are not a monolith, you're going to continue to go back and be paired again and again and again.
I think it's interesting when you brought up that they were paired together on the bus. It reminded me. You said this earlier, when they come on, Rufus goes, "Hi, y'all," and,
Mhm.
and he was very polite to the bus driver and just really respectful in that way. And then the bus driver hears all these kids picking on him, and he gets up, kind of rips these kids. He's like, "These kids are very polite. You need to take that for what it is and learn from them and do better like that." So I think it's interesting that, like, while yes, in one aspect, in monetary terms, and that reflects in the ratty clothes that they're wearing
Mhm.
and their appearance, they are lacking in resources. But I think it's really interesting, the dichotomy of lacking in financial resources and being plentiful in respect and politeness and morality, really.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting to me because they came from Arkansas, where Jim Crow laws would be enacted at that point. And so that politeness, I assume, comes with basically being, I don't know, for lack of a better term, humbled daily, or constantly being put to a place where they're sought as lessers in that community. Then to go to
Yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, because I mean, what we know about the South is a very, I guess, documented experience when you're black and when you're coming from that kind of population of people and you're down there and you're in the deepness of it. I always think of the deep South, like southern Louisiana, southern Arkansas. I think about all that. When I'm thinking of the South, I go to the deepest parts and what that experience was like to be there. And it's a very humbling experience because, as we all know, in the black community, one of the greatest tragedies that ever happened is Emmett Till. And what happens when you whistle at a white woman? Or, what happens if you talk back to people who are of non-color? So it's like you have those experiences, and you take that with you everywhere you go.
yeah,
And it's hard to. I was just reading I was on a YouTube video earlier today, and that kind of brings me back to this, is where even when you leave a certain area, when you're so used to having to make yourself small because you're in the presence of people who are considered, more privileged, you kind of shrink yourself down. You kind of minimize yourself, and a lot of that over politeness comes as a form of minimalization.
yeah.
when Micah brought that up about having to be humble because you come from the South, it reminded me of this really great moment in the first chapter where Kenny is outside playing and Byron and his friend's name, is it Buphead?
I'll cut Buffett is what I've been reading. Buford. That's what I've been reading.
Oh, I read Buphead like it's a nickname. Like
I don't know. Who named that child?
I don't. Yeah, I figured it was a nickname too, but we should probably like
figure that out.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, we'll figure it out.
Paul Curtis and be like, how do you pronounce this dude's name?
Right.
But Byron and his friend come up to Kenny and they go, you want to play a game? You want to learn how to survive a blizzard?
Right.
And they do all this stuff. They spin him around, and every time they'll do something, and then they'll chuck him into this snowbank. And at one point, Kenny says, and I wasn't going to let them see me cry. My plan was always to get up laughing. And like I said, you can look at this from a kid's perspective, from like an adult's perspective. We kind of know what's going on in the social climate around what the story is written around. And I immediately thought about how Black people would have to have that mentality in the South where, you know, if you can't come into this restaurant, that's, you know, really painful personally. You know, if you get pushed down in the street by a white man, you can't retaliate. You always have to have that get up laughing. You have to be humble, like Micah said. You have to behave a certain way, or else, you know, you'll get the cops called on you and they'll beat you too. Like, there's no, you have to have this disposition, whether or not you want it. And I thought a really powerful, looking at it from this, you know, perspective, it was a really powerful, you know, analysis of that whole thing. I don't know.
I mean, I know I taught that too, but you have to learn that so early on. It's like that's an early on lesson. You know, thinking about these kids playing this game, that's really not fun at all. But you know, this kid feels the need to be resilient through something he shouldn't have to go through.
Well, and I think it's interesting too because it's not only, and this is honestly such a well-written book, and how he molds these characters. And I'm honestly like, if we don't do something else of his for book club, I'm personally gonna go out and read something else that this dude has written because it is just that good, in my opinion. But not only is it steeped in all of the racial tensions that are going on in the South, but it's also a little bit about masculinity. And so, you know, that you have to posture for your brother. You have to be that tough kid. And we see more of that in the second chapter. Kenny is being paraded around class to class, and he actually gets taken. I think that's what Sam was talking about earlier. He's in the second grade. Byron is in the fifth grade, and he gets taken to Byron's class.
Yeah.
And he's so scared to go in and read, he doesn't even hear the teacher interacting. The teacher actually says to Byron, he goes, well, you can introduce him. You know him better than anybody. And he's so nervous to go in and read, he doesn't hear him say that. And so then he goes and reads, and he's you know, does well. And so well, in fact, that he's going too fast in this poem. And the teacher takes the book from him and flips it upside down, down a little bit. I'm like, that's insane. Turning the words upside down will slow him down a
Right, and I can't remember what he was reading, but it was like pretty advanced.
Yeah, something that like I would read like as an adult. But, and so then afterwards, they're walking out of school, and Kenny is thinking to himself, "Oh no, man, here it is. I'm gonna get it now."
Get it.
The kids are all starting to gather around, like something's about to go down.
Ready, aim, fire.
And Byron and his friend, that has a name, walk up to him and he goes, you know, that wasn't half bad or something like that. And he goes, but he says to Kenny, if that was me that they were parading around, I would at least ask them for some folding money.
Ooh, that part got me.
Kind of gives him one of these. And I'm just like, I made a note of it that's like severe approval for, you know, they make
from Byron anyway.
Byron has been held back at least once. Him and Buffett both.
I honestly think he's been held back twice.
I think he makes reference to the fact that it could be multiple times. Yeah. And so he doesn't take his education seriously. Obviously, they're all from the same family. They're not stupid. It's just that he's trying to be the cool kid, the bully, he doesn't care.
School.
Yeah. Yeah. Send your regards to Clark.
Right.
And so for him to care enough about his brother and education like together to give him that little subtle thing without going, too far overboard. Like that I know that meant a lot to Kenny for that to happen. And that's another little like interaction between them as males and how that whole relationship would go as brothers. And I just think it was really cool to see.
Yeah, it's a lot about that. It's a lot about Byron's education that kind of just made me wonder so much. It's like, what happened? Where did he go wrong? Was he like a product of the system not working for kids who are a little bit different, who aren't that motivated? So you kind of get that sense of, I wonder what his story is and why he isn't as successful academically.
Not to
And
but I think it would be really interesting, and I'm picking up foreshadowing. Maybe I'm totally off base. If they had Byron in Alabama, then moved to Michigan, and that has something to do with why he doesn't care about that kind of
isn't
stuff.
as successful, yeah. That's an interesting take, I think. I don't know. I wonder if that's going to speak to anything, or if he's going to have a change of heart and things, kind of pick up from there, and he becomes a better student as a result of Kenny's influence. But you just don't know how it's going to play out in that scenario. But I was very curious about what was going to happen to him in the future with his education. And you kind of look at these two kids coming from the same background, and one's academically struggling and one is successful. And you kind of see, the influence of family is strong, but it's not everything. And so looking at what shapes and motivates Kenny versus what shapes and motivates Byron in these contingencies outside of family, because it's definitely got to be something. And a part of me, I don't know, maybe it was just my upbringing, as a black kid in a house with my parents, that made me mad at the family. I was like, why are y'all not on Byron's ass? I mean, like, because that would be unacceptable in my home growing up. I mean, whoopings would be every day. The belt would be ready when I walked through the door. I'd have to just socially prepare myself for the ass beating that was about to come. Because there's no way I could skip school. There's no way I could miss the bus. There'd be no way I could flunk out of a class before I'm even out of elementary. So I was just wondering, what is it about Byron that they're so loose with him as a kid that's considered problematic?
Well, to me, I really get a lot of vibes of Malcolm in the Middle from this. You've got the very, very smart middle child, and then I mean his closest brother that's there with him is basically the same way as Byron acts, and for them, the reason that they're not on him, because he is older, they didn't really think that there was much that they could do with him, because I mean, you don't know exactly how much older Byron is than Kenny. And so it's kind of interesting, like with Malcolm in the Middle, they weren't expecting Malcolm to be smart. And so
it turned out to be.
It just could be this thing where they're not on Byron as much because they just really didn't have those expectations. They're just kind of like, oh, we've got a smart kid. That's interesting.
That's a really interesting take. Not
Yeah.
It is. Because I was like, I don't understand that. In my family, there was high expectations.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I find lacking with the perspective of this book is just the motivations of Byron and the parents, because it is written from a young child's perspective, and he wouldn't have that kind of knowledge of the world to be able to explore those motivations that they have. And that's something I really hope that they flesh out more later in the book, because I think that'll be really interesting and add even more layers.
Well, I think this is a good spot to kind of take and talk about what we think might happen going forward. We kind of touched on a couple of things. I think same to kind of speak to that. Like we're just starting to see, and hopefully it'll get fleshed out a little deeper what their motivations are. But I'm so interested. I'm so glad that it's written, and it's not just picking up like, "Hey kids, we're moving to Alabama." We're getting to see where they grew up. We introduced Rufus and Cody a little bit, and We see how they interact with some elements of the South.
Yeah.
But really, we're seeing them in their home state where they grew up and get to know them that way. And then I feel like once we know them well enough, then we're going to take the trip down to Birmingham.
Yeah.
So, I'm really excited to see if Byron. He has the tough exterior, and he's kind of the big man on campus for an elementary school kid. I wonder how that holds up. Not even just amongst the white and black dynamic, but amongst whatever school they end up going to. Can he continue that? Can he carry that over to where he's going? But then also how it interplays with the white and the black element there. We really don't have a lot from Joey at this point. We've got a couple of moments, but I'm sure and she's being younger. There's not as much to get into, but I'm sure we're gonna get some more of that. I wouldn't be surprised if Hambo and Henderson makes another appearance down the line and cause some trouble for mom and dad. I'm so excited. Like I said, I wasn't worried. I was just kind of aware that it was something that Quiz had read when he was younger. And having read just the first 3 chapters of this, I'm so excited to finish this book. And I might just finish the rest of it. Just wait for you guys to catch up.
And I think one thing I'm also looking forward to, in my head, I've just assumed that every character that we've met so far is black, and there's not really any interaction with a white person. And I'm not sure if we're going to get that until we move to Birmingham. But just that first interaction and how that plays out, with the political climate that the time this book is set in, and moving back to the South, I'm really interested to see how that happens.
I would bet that we will see some sort of interaction. I don't think it's going to be overly negative between one of these characters and a white character. I think it would make, when they eventually get to the South and have what I'm assuming are extremely negative interactions, I think it'll make it have a bigger impact if we've seen at least one specific white-black interaction while they're still in.
I mean, I don't know. We always have these connotations about the South and what it means to be black in the South and the experience that you may have. But a lot of the times what we forget is that the South is where our families are. So it's, this whole other side of who we are and what makes us, and, what makes us this, full realized family. And so I'm very excited to see if, what it means for them to become a part of their extended family unit and, what that experience is like. To kind of almost have your story completed from the place of its inception. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to, as well as, piecing together parts of themselves that they didn't know was who they were, and how it shapes them moving forward.
Yeah. Cool. So at this point, anybody still with us? If you guys have any questions, you have an observation you want to point out, give right there. I think that's where we're going to wrap up what we had for this time. This was just chapters 1 through 3. And so then for next Friday, we're going to be doing 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then from here on out until the 12th of March, we're going to be doing 4 chapters a week. So we didn't want to give people too much to read at one time. It is a nice, easy read.
Yeah.
It'll go fast.
Yeah, but everybody's busy and got everything to do, so we didn't want to put too much on there. But yeah, so if nobody has anything else, we'll be back next Friday with chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. Quiz will be here,
and at that time. You everybody for tuning in. Definitely.
Yeah,
and I did want to, before we hop off, just say if you guys could go take a look at our events. We did just last night post all of our events for March.
I'm
so
So excited for
Um,
March.
just a little overview. You guys can check it out to learn a little bit more. But we're watching a feminist documentary called "Knocking Down the House."
Knock down the house.
Knock down the house. And we're going to kind of have this similar like discussion about it the Friday immediately following the last day of this book club, and then the next week we're gonna do some poetry by feminist poems or poets, and then one thing, since we wanted to keep on the momentum that we have going this month, so starting the beginning of March, we're going to post a feminist poem every day, and we're going to analyze at the end of the month the 5 most engaged with poems throughout the month. So if there's a poem that you guys are, as our audience, really enjoys, like, comment, and share, and then we will announce on the 22nd of March the top 5 interacted with poems to take a deeper dive into on the 26th.
Yes, so please stay tuned for all these things that we have coming up. Like, again, if you want to be a part of these discussions, stay tuned to what we're doing. And in between time, in the meantime, you guys can definitely go to Netflix and stream Knock Down the House, just in preparation for that documentary and that breakdown. And definitely continue to ride along with us as we continue to pump out this content and get into the heart of equitable issues in our culture, in our world, in our society, in America. So definitely thank you guys for being here. Check out all of our social media. And if you feel compelled to make a donation, please do not hesitate. We definitely appreciate anything that you guys can bring to the table.
It'd be super dope if you made a donation.
Yep. And I'm not sure if this has been said in a public forum, but we are 100% grassroots. We are funded by our community, 100%. So anything you guys are willing to contribute to help us and to help our cause,
help us quit our.
Yeah. And we really want to start focusing on some lobbying issues coming up. We want to continue to do these kind of like educational, highlighting voices. We want to do more community outreach where we're actually helping people who need help right now.
Elections coming up in 2022. That's what I'm excited about.
Oh yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us and being a part of this medium.
Yeah. I guess about it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.